Yes.
Okay. Well, hi folks. My name's David Heaney, and I'm your host for tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I lived for 10 years in Coigach, and then I lived for another 10 in Ullapool. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm an incomer. I also don't have any links to tourism. So tonight, I'm just really going to hold the coats in this discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. First thing that I'm going to do is take you around the panel and let them introduce themselves. So the first person I can go to is Lisa. Lisa, can you say who you are and what?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm Lisa MacDonald, and I'm the exact opposite. I lived for a long time in Ullapool, but now I live in Kylesku, and I love it here. I have no links with tourism. I'm a teacher, and I'm also involved in all kinds of community stuff. So I suppose my view on this is slightly sort of distanced in that it doesn't affect me directly, except that I have some concerns. But I do appreciate that people's livelihoods depend on it, and mine doesn't. So
Okay.
the reason I'm involved here is because I became part of this little radio crew, and so I'm really looking forward to the debate tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Lisa. Ruth, you're next in my line of vision. So would you like to introduce yourself? And Lisa, you can go on mute now, as everyone else should be.
Yeah, my name is Ruth Bradley. I live in Kylesku as well. I've been here for 5 years. I was over on the East Coast before this. I am very much involved in tourism. I took over the old SYHA hostel in Kylesku, and this would be my 5th season running it. But I'm also part of the community. I'm in the COVID response group and pretty active locally, and both my kids go to school in Ullapool. So yeah, I'm kind of foot in both worlds, I feel like.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm going to keep it going. And it's another Kylesku person next. It's Laura. You're next on my list. So would you like to introduce yourself to the audience tonight?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm Laura. I live in Coigach as well. I've been here for about 6 years, moved here from Stirling. I have been for the past 3 years or so involved in developing a destination management plan for Westeros with the Westeros Biosphere. And we launched that on the 10th of March this year. So that was quite an interesting experience, and ever since I've just been kind of keeping a ear to the ground to, well, really figure out what the mood is in both the communities and the tourism, because with destination management we're very much concerned about the social, environmental and economic factors in tourism. So we have to very much keep an eye on what the industry is doing as much as what the community is doing. So that's why I'm just so interested in what's going on just now, and why I'm really pleased to be part of this discussion.
Thanks, Laura. Next on my screen, I'm going up the ways now. I can see Madeline. Would you like to introduce yourself, Madeline?
Hello, Madeline. I've just moved into Ullapool a year ago from Storehead in Assynt, where I had lived permanently since 1985. And I got involved in tourism there. We had three what you call them, self-catering chalets on the Croft, and I then later did dinner, bed and breakfast as well. And during that time, I worked in Lochbroom Tourist Office for 2 seasons, the Coolagh Hotel for 1 season, and I was elected onto Sutherland Tourist Board, which then became part of Highlands of Scotland Tourist Board, which I was on, and then finally I was appointed to the board of Scottish Tourist Board, which is now Visit Scotland. During the time I was in the tourist office, I realised there was a need for something bigger, and so I led a team which created the Lochbroom tourist, what was it called, visitor centre, which fulfilled a need at the time, but needs changed. So Visit Scotland closed it about 3 years ago. I'm not actively involved in tourism now, but I take a great interest in it.
Thank you very much, Madeline. That was very interesting. I'm going to keep moving along here, and Di is the next person in my view.
Hi, I'm Di Rusling. I'm resident at Blousery, 7 miles north of Ullapool, little tiny track, only 4 houses down here. So we've been relatively quiet for the last 12 weeks or so. I've lived here for 15 years and been coming up to the area for about 25 years. Originally from Suffolk, but this is home now for the rest of our lives. And I am actively involved in tourism. I started Ullapool Holiday Homes 11 years ago. I have my own self-catering unit and I manage a number of others around the village and north to Elphin. So I'm very interested to hear what the community thinks and looking at plans as to how we go forward and welcome visitors back to the area. I'm also a member of Welcome Ullapool. I've been actively involved in that for 3 years. So with the website and floral arrangements around and bin coverings and entrances and signage and all kinds of things like that. So just really enjoyed living in the area as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Di. Caroline, you're next on my list here.
Okay, hello. My name's, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Caroline Williams and I've been involved in tourism, I suppose, for the last 30 years, but mostly as a tour leader, leading small group cycling and trekking trips all over the world. And then for the last 15 years, I've been in Scotland. So I helped set up Edinburgh bike tours when I was in Scotland, and then I moved up the Highlands. And here too, I'd say 90% of my work is involved in tourism and it's all freelance. Between May and September, I make probably 90% of my income and it's all from tourism. So this situation obviously has massively affected me. But my main role here is as part of this lovely little radio team I'm very proud to be part of.
Thanks, Caroline. Jock, you're next in my list here.
Thanks, David. Good evening, everybody. My name's Jock Urquhart. I'm the kind of general manager and chief dog's body at the Cayley Place in Ullapool, which is the family business. We've been there since 1970 when my father Robert started it. And we're obviously enjoying a wonderfully fantastic 50th anniversary year. I've been involved in tourism and hospitality all of my life. I grew up in the trade and I've cut my teeth in a variety of circumstances around the world, from the Western Isles to Melbourne, and returned back to the village, having been something of an Ullapool yo-yo through my adult life, periods here, periods away. I returned coming on for 3 years ago now with my partner Kate, and we take a kind of primary role alongside my sister and her husband running the family business. And yes, obviously this is a devastating situation for so many aspects of the economy, and I'm really interested to hear what the community feeling is about the return of people, and also to discuss some of the economic importance of tourism in this area.
Yeah, exactly why we're here tonight, Jock. So for sure, yeah. So thanks for that. Finally, I go to Brendan, who's I might be the front man here, but he's really running this show. So Brendan, you want to introduce yourself and tell us everything's going fine out there in Facebook land?
So what you're trying to say, Dave, basically is that you're the front end of the horse and I'm the back end, isn't that right?
Something like that, aye.
Well, yeah, I mean, mainly here, I'm just, this is a Lochbroom community update radio team project, if you like. And so it's a bit of an experiment. And, people have actually been saying already in the community meetings in Lochbroom, and I think possibly elsewhere, that, they're quite keen on getting public's participation in some of the discussions about what's happening with this whole pandemic in our communities. And this is really, I suppose, the radio team's first attempt to do that. Now, okay, the number of people in the panel isn't huge, but we are encouraging people who have seen the various Facebook links on local community Facebook pages to put questions in there, and we'll relay them to Dave and hopefully get them covered. So, hopefully it's going to be nice and clean. And I'll leave it over to you.
You can paraphrase, Brendan. You don't have to give me the gory details. But yeah, sure. So if you're watching us here, send in a comment and we'll try and put it to the panel here. And we'd welcome that, because we're really trying to create, this is a feeble attempt at trying to have a public meeting, I suppose. So let's see what happens. So, I mean, the first question I'm going to ask is, you all, and I want your personal view on this, not whatever the government is going to tell us or what everything is. Do you feel ready for tourists coming back in to where you live just now? And if not, when do you think you might? And I'm going to go back the other way from before. I'm going to start with Jock and just get his views on what he thinks about that. I have no idea what you'll say, so it's going to be interesting.
In many ways, David, I perhaps don't know what I'm going to say myself.
I know, yeah.
I think that the past 12 weeks now have been really a remarkable situation, and I would desperately like to avoid using the phrase unprecedented, but since you've given me the honor of being first, let me be the one who gets to use it. A really difficult situation to know exactly how to navigate it in terms of just what is a public health crisis, as we're told, and there are large spikes of death all over the planet, and so precautions had to be taken. From my own point of view, wearing a Cayley Place hat, then it's a really difficult and challenging time. As everybody on this panel, and indeed everybody watching from the community will know, Ullapool enjoys a very seasonal aspect to business in the village, in terms of making hay while the sun allegedly shines through the summer season, in order to kind of enable us all to weather the storm of the quieter winter months. It strikes me that certainly from my own point of view, with regards the bar and restaurant aspect to our business, that with a number of providers in the village, the local populace is not perhaps enough to sustain that, and so missing out on a big summer season really factors in our thinking for forward planning. But in terms of what might be a desire just to get back to trading as quickly as possible, it would be folly to rush in. And not being an epidemiologist, I have to be guided by the view of the government and the health advice that comes out in that regard. But where the village seems to have been, the village and indeed the surrounding area seems to have been remarkably free from the virus, certainly not overwhelming numbers of cases. The fact remains that I feel if we see a massive influx of people, and from some of the large urban populations, both in Scotland and the rest of the countries of the United Kingdom, who might be busting a gut to get out of their spaces because they've been so locked down, we will be, hopefully, in some regards, a prime destination for those folk. But yet, that could see us leading, that could lead rather to a large spike in numbers. And so I would like to see some sort of very cautious opening up of business. Certainly, I think that it would be lovely if we were able to get back to a point where we could be suitably social within viewpoints within our own communities. I think that today there was a number of folk out very responsibly, I have to say, participating in some sort of presence towards the Black Lives Matter campaign, and just acknowledging the community support for that. And lots of the voices on the street were saying how remarkable it was to see so many people, again, people they hadn't seen for a long time. And so in that regard, I'm ready for us to open up a little bit, but I have my nervous head about a large influx from further afield.
Thanks, Jock. Very interesting. Now, the rest of you can answer the question I've asked, which is, do you feel ready for tourism? But feel welcome to respond to what Jock has said as you're doing it, and that's the way we'll build as we go around. So I'm just going to go back the opposite way from what I did before, as kind of, that's just random. So Caroline, I'm going to let you speak next and have your point of view on the question and maybe what Jock said.
Okay, yeah, Jock, that was very interesting, and I think yeah, I agree with all of that. I think for me, it's a like everybody, it's a big dilemma. I would say most of the work I had booked between now and October has gone anyway. So in a way, for me, there's no need to rush because it's just gone. As a freelance in various different elements of the tourism industry, that's that. But there are other more indirect ways I work that are affected by tourism, for example, in the bookshop and as an assistant at Bridge House Art, and as you know, those things not opening up also have an effect. I think it's really tricky, isn't it? I'm a really fearless, I think, person who has very little anxiety and takes massive risks in my life. And I suddenly feel I've become really quite scared because we've been just staying indoors, quite isolated. And so I have got quite a fear of people coming up the road and bringing COVID. And I think without being able to go out and look at the world and compare and get some context, that fear builds. So my gut reaction is, oh, please, everyone just stay away still and let us stay indoors. But that's not sustainable. It's not healthy for us as humans. It's not manageable financially. It's not manageable for in any way living here. So I absolutely get everybody's worry, and I share it. But I, you know, I think, yeah, somehow we've got to find a balance. And I do find it interesting. I think last weekend it was our first sunny bank holiday weekend after we had a little bit of easing of the rules, and it felt as if the world had come to Ullapool because there were motorbikes and people we didn't recognise in the petrol station, and it felt like they were everywhere. And I felt that, and I heard other people saying that. And then I started to look at pictures from other places in Scotland, like Balloch and Luss, and then places in England, in Cumbria, where you can't drive down the road for the cars that are parked. And actually, we didn't have billions of people all descending here. So I think it's just, I don't know. I don't think any of us know what the answer is, but I'm very interested, and it's tricky. And yeah, we have to open up. It's not just tourism. We've got to open up and go back out in the world, poke our noses out, and it's frightening, whether it's to do with tourism or not.
Yes, thanks, Caroline. I realise it's a question that's we don't know the answer to, but it's just really good to hear people's views. So Di, I'm going to turn to you next and let you have your say on, are you ready for tourism?
Well, I think very good comments from both Caroline and Jock. I think we've been very protected here. And I mean, living 7 miles outside of the village, I mean, we've seen nobody. And so just to go into the village to do shopping has been, you know, a challenge in itself. You know, wearing a face mask, going into Tesco's, seeing people around, when here you step outside the door and don't see anybody at all. So I really noticed when the restrictions started to be lifted that there was quite a lot of folk on the road. We saw a lot of people going up and down, a few motorbikes, lots of traffic, folk from Ullapool coming out to Blousery to walk on the hill. And that was a little bit of a shock to start with. And I mean, on a personal basis, I have a lot of concerns too about reopening and opening too soon, and lots of visitors coming back to the area. But on a sustainable village and economic viewpoint, I think we have to have a balance, and there will be many people that really need to have visitors coming back to the village to have an income, because so much of their income, which has relied on tourism, has gone for the past few months and could go for the rest of the year. And we all know that during the summer months, we work very hard and we make a lot of income, and it sees folk through the winter. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have great concerns about how they'll manage throughout the winter, not having an income at all. The thing that strikes me is that we talk about visitors coming back, and we think just of it as being tourists coming to stay in bed and breakfasts or self-catering or hotels. But we have visitors coming all the time, and we'll have family visiting, and we have lorry drivers and delivery people, and we have lots of other folk that come in, and they are all visitors too. So I think it's something to bear in mind that all the visitors to the area won't just be the day trippers and as we will see tourists coming in. So they're my thoughts on it, David.
Thank you, Di. Yeah, you're right. There's a really tricky balance for us here. Madeline, what would you add to what's been said so far, and what's your view?
Well, I would agree with everything you've all said about such a difficult balance. But I also would like to think that this is a worldwide problem, this tourism problem. And in many places, places like Venice, Prague, Budapest, and all sorts of places like that, they're sitting down and evaluating what the kind of tourism they've had. Is this the kind of tourism they want to continue with? Yeah. Because Venice especially has been ruined by tourism, especially with huge cruise ships and so on. And it seems to me that as a community, we've got, when you have a threat, you have to try and turn it into an opportunity. And it seems to me that this is a time, an opportunity to look at the kind of tourism, what the tourism had become in the last few years, which was different from what it used to be. Because we have a tourism where people are rushing through, which they didn't used to do. Well, you all know what I'm talking about. Before the NC 500, tourism was changing, but that accelerated the change, I would say. And it took off, the NC 500 took off exponentially, but the infrastructure was not there to support it. And I think it's maybe time that we, as a community and sharing with other communities, looked at this and said, and tried to decide what can we do to make this better? Not just for us, the people who live here, for the visitor, and especially for the environment. And we've got to look at things like, well, the infrastructure, the roads, as you know, well, I lived until a year ago where there was single track road. Motorhomes couldn't get, some of the motorhomes couldn't get into passing places. They were too big. There's a litter problem, toilets, all sorts of things, waste, so on and so forth. And do we really want to continue with motorhomes, cars, motorbikes and so on, flashing through, trying to do this road trip as quickly as possible? I think it was wrongly marketed at the beginning as a road trip rather than a tourism experience. And I feel that we've got to look at this tourism experience and see if it's the best for us and for our visitors. And I would like to think that we could take time because unfortunately, this time is forced upon us. And I would like to think that we could look at this. I am not actively involved in tourism at the moment, but I feel very, very much for those of you who are not getting your income at the moment because of this. But can we try and use this time to maybe improve the product that we have and make it better for everybody, including the environment?
That's excellent, Madeline, and raises about 20 more questions for me to ask. And I did promise you my dog would try to get into the show, and she seems to be barking in the background here, as ever. Anyway, I will pass on here, and Laura, you're next in my vision. So would you like to say what you think, but also respond to maybe some of the other points there?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find anything to disagree with there, isn't it? You know, everyone's experiences are so similar. I think personally as well, you know, my kind of gut reaction has been, oh, I don't really feel like we are ready for tourism. But then we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. And so, you know, as humans, you know, you have that anxiety of, oh, right, what's the future going to look like? And I think having the kind of vision that what Madeline's just described there, you know, requires quite a lot of vision from people, and it's very difficult psychologically to have that level of vision when we just don't know what the future holds at all over the next few months, even, never mind the next year. But I totally agree that this is our opportunity to take stock collectively and decide, well, what do we want in the future? Do we want to go back to working 7 days a week? Is there another model? What would that model be? And I suppose we all have time to figure that out right now. So yeah, I turn that into an opportunity. And from the perspective of having been involved in the destination management plan development, we've got a baseline from 2019 that we can work with now. So we could, thankfully that was all complete and finished. So we've got the, the volume and value work that we did. We've also got a look at the built environment, the public realm, that's the infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. We've got a snapshot in time from 2019. So that is a tool for us to use to say, well, what would we like 2021 to look like? And then how can we get from 2019 to 2021? How we get there, I haven't got a clue. That's why I need your guys' help.
Yeah, entirely. Yeah, I managed to not unmute myself there. A schoolboy mistake there, but thanks, Laura. Yeah, that's really interesting. Right, Ruth, we're getting to the end of this question here, so it's more difficult to say things, but I realize, but it's, what's your answer to the question? And you can respond to any of the points anyone else has made along the way.
Thanks, David. So if the question is, am I ready to have tourists? The answer is no, not today. If like picking up on what Madeline said, I'm not ready to offer the tourist experience that I was offering before the pandemic on site at the hostel. Absolutely not. And I don't, as a community member, I don't think my village is ready to have the tourist experience we used to have. And I don't think Ullapool is ready to have the tourist experience we used to have. So at the moment, what I'm seeing for myself in my personal life, like over the last few months, I've gone through like stages and waves of adapting to the situation. Like the start of the build up of the COVID-19 crisis, I was focused on my business. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose all of the European trade. That was back in February, and then it escalated, and then very quickly it was like, oh, this is way more serious than I imagined. The place is closing down, and kind of moving into trying to accommodate the idea of losing a whole season, which is something I've experienced already. I lost June, July, and August 2 years ago when I redeveloped the site and built pods and had new treatment system. And so I know the economic impact of that goes on for years. Like I was only just about to start a season where I wasn't in crippling debt. This was supposed to be the one. So there's an awful lot of existential anxiety as a business person around that. But realistically, this is a survival level thing. My partner is high risk. I'm running a shielding house. My children are young, and that's it. That's my priority. So I'm kind of stacking it all based on what's the most important thing. And bringing the hostel back online is not the most important thing until I feel like my partner is safe and my children are safe and my community is safe. And I think I've only just about turned a corner in the last week of having enough information, about infection control cleaning and how the public was going to respond to the easing of lockdown and what might be needed in order to replace lockdown so that we have equivalency of protection. And so I feel I'm not ready, but I'm more in capacity to imagine a future of having people back on site and still keep my partner safe from the potential exposure to COVID-19, which has been wrecking my head. So I've finally got a system I think would work in my head, but it means that I can't do it on my own. I need to have the whole community on board with replacing lockdown with a series of imperfect, not quite good enough measures that all put together would keep us safe, basically.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
That sounds quite straightforward to resolve. I think that's it sorted. Obviously not.
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I did do my first. Actually, I locked one of the pods after someone left it in the start of March, and I just locked the door, and I was just like, I'm not touching it. And I know that sounds awful, but I just did a full infection control kind of trial run there about 2 days ago, and I was nervous going in. I was like, oh, and I had to kind of tend to myself a little bit and you know, I think I'll need a little bit of reassuring myself and practice and just trust that I can do this thing. You know, I have training in it already, but I just need to trust that I can do it. Like,
Sure.
but yeah.
Yeah, sounds tricky, right? Lisa, you've been waiting for so long to answer this question. That's a shame. But on the other hand, you get to say what everyone else does. I'll go to Brent in a minute afterwards, actually. But
has Jock had his turn?
yeah,
Have
Jock
we missed
started.
you
Yeah.
after?
Do you
All
not
right,
remember
okay,
that eloquent
Oh.
speech from Jock?
Yes, that's right. I can see this from all kinds of different points of view. I totally get the having to make hay while the sun shines, as you said, Jock, that I get that that's how a lot of the business locally is structured. And whilst I completely also agree with Madeline that to a point, actually, for a few years, it was lovely to see the visitors in the summer, but the past 2-3 years, it's actually been too much. Like, where at the end of a season, I feel like as a community, we're exhausted. Our infrastructure is exhausted. Trying to commute against tourist traffic is really, really hard work. And so I agree with what Madeline was saying about using this as an opportunity to recalibrate and to rethink and to change. Because the thing is, there's this kind of inbuilt elasticity in people where you can be bent out of shape so far, but there's always this urge to kind of spring back to readopt the shape you had before. And I think that's unlikely, whilst it's still evident in the sort of wider social narrative, but I think it's unlikely to work that way. I don't think we can spring back into the shape we were. I think life is going to look different. I mean, in education, we're just working this out right now, in what way life is going to be different and how long for. And then from that, even in education, we're thinking there are things we can take forward that are real opportunities. And I think the same must be true of tourism, where we can, this is our time to make some changes and to think about how we want to empower ourselves to shape this rather than just have it happen to us. And then my other thought is that it seems to me there are at least 3 kinds. When we say, you know, are we ready for tourists? It seems to me there are at least 3 kinds of readiness. One is sort of at local community level. What steps have we put in place? You know, do we have the hand sanitizers where they should be? All that kind of thing. But then on a much wider level, this narrative of opening up, going back to work and everything, that is a sort of a general, well, I feel it's a political narrative that actually, when you compare it to other countries and where they are in their coronavirus journey and the countries that are now reopening, they are at quite a different point. And I don't think we are at that point yet. I think right now, with the R number the way it is, and with how little we still understand about how this works, and with the infrastructure around track and trace still in such a pitiful place, I feel that this is like Russian roulette. This is like, you know, let's open up and see what happens. And I'm not confident that at any level we are ready.
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, that's been fantastic. Just hearing you all respond to that question. I'm going to let Brendan have a word here. Brendan, is everything working out there? And we're getting across, we're getting messages in, I see, yeah?
Astonishingly, to possibly Irish people there. I feel a bit like Colette from the Late Late Show right here now, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, we've got some comments and questions coming in, which we'll maybe put to the panel later on during the discussion.
Very good, yeah.
And we've got, I mean, we're not got thousands of viewers, but we do have some, 60,
Hundreds.
70, 80 viewers out there at least.
Very good,
so,
yeah, that's not bad, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I suppose then I'll ask another question, and then maybe we can go to the viewers' concerns, as it were. So, I wonder a bit, like, there seems to be the islands seem to have achieved a different way of doing things, in that CalMac have got rules for who will go out to Stornoway, and my understanding is also that the same kind of measures are in place in Orkney and Shetland. What do people think? Do you think it would be possible to have, let's say, a Northwest Highlands approach, or even more localized than that? You know, would that be possible? Right. What I'm going to do this time is, if you want to answer that question, put your hand up and I'll go to you. Right. Okay. Madeline, you need to unmute.
Right. There was a radio program this morning looking at Skye, and they were complaining about the usual that we all complain about: litter and not enough parking and so on. And there was quite a lot of discussion about it. And it seems to me that this is a common problem in beautiful places, and we're so lucky to live in a beautiful place, and therefore we attract people. But are we giving them the best experience they could have? I think back to the kind of tourism we had in the 80s, 90s, and in fact up to about 2000 and something or other. And people came, they didn't come for one night. They came for, in bed and breakfast, probably minimum 3 nights. In self-catering, minimum a week. Most of them stayed a week, a fortnight, 3 weeks. After my first year in dinner, bed and breakfast, I had people who came for a week, 10 days, a fortnight, because they wanted to be in this place. And they got so much out of this place, and they spent money in this place because they had time to go in and have a drink quietly and have peaceful night, having a good meal and so on, because they had time. And I think it's worth looking at, is this rushing through? I don't think the tourist is getting the best experience, but it makes it very difficult for the tourism operators, because they're having to change things every day and so on and so forth. And so I think we've got to look at this and see if we could change it. Now, I know that in some places, for instance, Yosemite in California and Florence and so on, they had visitor management where they counted so many people were allowed in a day and then they stopped, so that the place retained its sustainability, I suppose, and its beauty. Should we be looking at this? I think there's so many things we should be looking at while we have this time forced upon us, unfortunately, but let's use it to create something better than we've had recently.
Now I've got Caroline here, wants to respond to you. I don't know if she wants to disagree with you or agree with you. We'll see.
No, I want to massively agree. I don't think I'm answering your question about Northwest Highlands specifically, but I really wanted to respond to what Madeline and Laura said, because that's one of my thoughts too, that since I've lived up here, all I've really heard is we wish, I'm not sure if we're allowed to mention the routes, but we wish this hadn't happened, we wish it hadn't started, we wish it would slow down, we wish it, and in a way, as I've said, I work in tourism, so I desperately need the income, but bearing in mind we have to think bigger than that, and that's not going to happen possibly this year. I do think it's a massive opportunity. We've paused, and what we've been wishing for has happened, that it's stopped. And so if we could use this time constructively to think, how can we, it's not going to go away, but how can we restart it with it a little bit under our control, and think about the things we benefited from and the things we don't like about it. So as Madeline just said, you know, I keep thinking, if only B&B and accommodation providers could all agree that we just let people stay for a minimum of 3 nights. And you know, I've got a friend in Applecross who does that with her B&B. People can only stay a minimum of 2 nights. It means that people pause, they have a look at the beautiful surroundings. They can't treat it as a racetrack, because it's not. You just can't physically do it. Yeah. And they spend money. They spend money in the restaurants. They spend money going, or they go up the hill. They appreciate the beauty and they understand what a lovely area it is. But it's something to be done over years. Come back, and so I see it as an opportunity. It's paused. What we wished for has happened. It's stopped, and we could spend this time constructively trying to see how to restart it.
Right, you agree? Okay. Right, I've got a show of hands here. Lisa, you need to watch. You flicked your hair. That's almost like in an auction, you know, where you might actually get to speak. But actually, it's Ruth. Ruth has her hand up first. I'm going to go to Ruth, and then I'm going to go to Di, and then I'm going to Jock. So there you go. So Ruth, you're first. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, David. I had 2 things I just want to pick up on. Just to have a caution around the idea that we all want the transient NC500 market to go. I mean, obviously my business is almost exclusively geared towards that market. And I've spent every season that I've been in this community serving that market and seeing the benefit that the people who do travel around Scotland in this way, at least at my hostel, the benefit they get from having connection with nature in a way that they would never have in their normal life. And even though it might not be the preference of this panel's way of accessing the Scottish Highlands or this area, it's definitely serving a function, especially for people who are time poor, who don't have a lot of time to have recreational time in the Highlands. And so I don't know that I would agree with demonizing it, but realistically, I think I would hate to conflate the frustrations or the tensions or the difficulties of the NC500 and the very real lack of facilities to serve that market. It's kind of blown up way beyond the infrastructure of this area, and that's a massive problem. I definitely would not like that to be conflated with what do we need to do to make our communities safe, to reintroduce visitors of all types and raise the exposure risk to COVID-19. This is like a way different spectrum, and it's like a bit like Di said, the virus doesn't care whether you're a tourist or not. It doesn't care what your motivation for travel is. Someone who lives here, who goes to Inverness and comes back for the day, can bring it with them. I think as a community, we need to focus all our attention right now to replace the very blunt, brutal lockdown with a tapestry of other things that will give us some protection. And so I guess I think there's a long-term conversation about how to accommodate tourists who want to travel instead of base camp, but I wouldn't want to conflate the two things at this time.
Yeah, sure. Okay, Di, what you were wanting to speak, so you're next. So your comments on this issue about can we regionalize and can we change tourism, I suppose, back to something better?
Yeah, I don't know whether we can regionalize or not. I think it would be very difficult. You know, do we close the snow gates and say, you know, we've got 200 people in today, nobody else can come? I don't know how you could put systems in place to manage that. But one of the points I wanted to say is, I mean, I completely understand Ruth's position, whereas, you know, the pods that she set up in the hostel is in a beautiful area that people come and stay there for a night or a couple of nights and enjoy the area. Huge number of the self-caterings, the things that I'm involved in, we generally have folk for a minimum of a week, quite often 2 weeks, and, you know, fairly regularly 3 weeks, even up to 4 or 5 weeks. And so they do come into the area. They come back year after year. They've been coming for 11 years that I've been doing this, and I was in tourism at the campsite for 6 years prior to that. You get the folk who are repeat visitors that come because they love the area, they like the nature, they like the peace, they like the mountains, and they do spend a lot of money in the village, and you know, it helps our economy. One of the things that I've really noticed in the last probably 2 years is the huge number of Airbnbs that have sprung up. So although folk will probably stay in those to travel the route, and I agree with what Madeline and Caroline has said, that the infrastructure that hasn't been in place to cope with that, particularly with motor campers, wild camping, toilet facilities, etc. It's so easy to put your property on Airbnb, and you know, and that's created a huge throughput of people just looking for one night stays. And how would you, you know, I'll ask the group, how would you manage this? Because that's an individual's choice. Yeah, and collectively we may all want to come together to make these changes, and I think you would get a certain population that would try hard to do this, but there will be people that are very happy just to have one night stays and moving on, and that's their livelihood livelihood that depends on it. So really difficult, I think, to try and control the number of visitors that we come in. I mean, I welcome other people's thoughts on how you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jock, you wanted to speak. So let's hear what your perspective is about regionalisation, maybe from the Kylesku Place point of view, you know?
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, well, I would agree to an extent with everything that's been said, but I'd certainly agree with Di in her last comments there with regard to regionality, given that the roads that mostly make up the NC 500 are trunk roads. It's going to be very difficult to kind of roadblock them and make any distinction about who can come in and limit numbers in that way. I agree with the concerns expressed about the number of one-night stays. Certainly, personally, as a hotelier, we've seen the makeup change considerably from multiple night stays through to the one-night stays, with the rise of the initiative to bring more visitors to the area. And I think Madeline said it almost in her opening comments that perhaps it was initially, the good idea was slightly the wrong idea, in that it shouldn't have been sold as a driving holiday, but rather than a destination in its own right. As I've said to many people who turn up and say, "Oh, we're doing the NC 500," as if they're the only ones who are doing it. You know, I say, well, it's amazing since they built that road. But also, Madeline talked about the type of experience that we want people to have when they're here. And at the very heart of the Kylesku Place's ethos, if I can speak there specifically for a second, and others share it, it's very much a communal and a gathering and a sharing experience. We get to know the people who come to visit us, because the whole world comes to see us, and we learn from that. And we get to share our community, the things that happen here. And it's not just the mountains and the lochs and the lovely weather and the occasional bad weather that are the attraction for people, but it's the pace of life. You know, there's nothing more exciting when you're on holiday than sitting and watching people work. And what we have to seriously acknowledge is that over the last 20, 30 years, the employment scene has changed in the Highlands, and for good or ill, there's been a massive push to monopolizing or making good of the visitor market. And so there's a very real extension to the wider community in an economic impact if that type of business doesn't come back in some form, because the amount of jobs that are dependent on it, and then by extension those which don't even seem to be directly related to tourism, suppliers in Inverness, shops and so on, auxiliary services that support the more obviously tourist or visitor based businesses, then that has a real knock-on effect, and we're going to be looking at serious hardship in the Highlands, especially as the support structures that have been put in place and are welcomed by most businesses are phased out. There's going to have to be a real plan there. A last thing before I go on too long about regionality is that, and I really am keen to not be overtly political in any other sense here, but if one is looking at regional things and being measured in different ways, then there have been different directives within the quartet of areas, shall we say, that make up our current bureaucratic system in the United Kingdom. And so perhaps at that point there could be some sort of manipulation of movement, as we see the number of deaths today recorded at 0 in Scotland, then following the phased plan and a very slow localised return as per the Scottish Government's roadmap, then maybe you might see people move nationally before moving internationally. Yes,
indeed, Jock. Yes, that allows me to make a small interjection of my own, in that similarly in Northern Ireland today there were no deaths, and a couple of times over recent months I've had the joy of hearing Northern Ireland and Scotland be in agreement on certain of the policies. Okay, I see Ruth's got her hand up, so I'm going to take one more person this, and then I'm going to ask some other questions.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point. Like I would anticipate that the international market, you know, is going to be very much smaller than the normal. But realistically, personally, I'm more concerned about, I don't know if this is okay to say, but I'm quite concerned about the domestic market because of how much different it is in England than in Scotland, and how England is one of the most out of control countries in Europe is in regards to COVID-19, and because the handling of it seems so haphazard. In some ways, I'd almost feel more confident about having conscientious kind of guests from countries where the virus is pretty low in community transmission than an influx of people from our own country. It just feels really, it doesn't sometimes make sense, you know, that there's more safety with having a domestic market indefinitely.
Forgive me interjecting just very briefly, but I was being slightly facetious. I included England in my international comment.
Right, now that's enough of that now. Sure. Okay, well, listen, I think it's time for some feedback from our listeners, I think the regionalisation sounds it may be more difficult for us than it is for the islands, but I'm going to quote you here. Ben Mackin's written in and said, "Great discussions on a complex topic." So there you can all kind of relax and know that this is going down well. But I wanted to first of all go to a comment or question from my old pal John Miller, who's of course asking the difficult question here, which is related to what we've been talking about, and saying, is this an opportunity for a Highland economy to not be so dependent on tourism? And if so, do you have any ideas what that might look like? I'm looking around the panel here, and I see one person I think could maybe address that, and that's Lisa. Maybe would you like to have a go at answering that question? Can we be less dependent on tourism?
Gosh, I'm not sure if you'll qualify to answer that. I think that this is a very, very big cycle and a very big question. And I think it's to do with land management and depopulation and with local empowerment and local governance. And I think it would be very easy to sort of throw up your hands in horror and say, well, there is no other industry, so this is all we've got. I think that maybe there is a place here in terms of this whole review of the cards that we have in our hand. There is definitely a place within this to apply some pressure and to make some changes that are going to be of long-lasting benefit in changing the economic structure of our area. I think sometimes tourism, I mean, it's a great thing, and it's an obvious thing because we live in a very, very beautiful place, and so it's obvious that people are going to want to come and visit us, and that's a wonderful thing, and I would never want to take away from that. But at the same time, it's also quite poignant that there isn't that much else that is left to us to choose from, and I think maybe there is definitely a place here, like I said, to apply some pressure and to make some changes in terms of, well, for example, the pattern of land ownership and land management, even in terms of crofting, depopulation. I think that all of these things could be part of a much bigger set of game pieces.
All right, now I've got, you said you couldn't answer the question, Lisa. You did very well there, I think. I have Ruth, and then I have Laura, who wanted to respond as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Lisa around that big question of land and especially housing. But I think this idea that we're going to go back to normal, that narrative that we're aiming to go back to where it was, you know, at Christmas. Actually, there are so many industries that are now ready for the disruption that's been predicted for quite a number of years. And if we in the Highlands could expedite the rollout of fibre optic broadband, then a lot of this home working is predicted to continue indefinitely. And there are a lot of industries where you will no longer have to go into the office in order to work. So the potential for attracting a living community that doesn't solely depend on tourism is at its highest, I'd say, it's ever been that I've known of. If we can, like, collectively as a community put a voice to the Scottish Government to really prioritise investing in broadband in all the local remote areas, then yeah, you've got a really good chance of attracting a diverse economic group into the area, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've been home working in Northwest Highlands for the last 20 years, more or less. The majority of my work has been home based, not entirely, but certainly and almost completely in the last 5 years. And people are just realizing that it's possible to do that. So yeah, sorry, Laura, I was going to let you speak, and instead of that, I spoke. That's the wrong thing. I have to keep zipped, you know.
No, I'd echo exactly what you said there, David. As somebody that works from home as standard, I've really watched the recent weeks with some amusement to all the different tools and resources that are suddenly out there for how to work effectively from home, how to manage your team remotely, all of these things that are starting to come out. So yes, we need to strengthen the call for good connectivity through fibre optic broadband and the such like, but there also needs to be a call for managers, businesses, public sector to recognise that people can work from home efficiently and effectively and empower people to do that. And then you could viably live in a remote area like ours and work from home. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work with a satellite-based broadband in Pulbean many years ago. But yeah, where were we? Yeah, I'm going to, Caroline wants to make a comment, and then I'm going to take you to some of the other comments that have been put in online. I'm going to read some of them out, and I'm going to ask you another question, okay? Caroline.
Okay, I'm not sure it's directly answering the question, but I'd just like to say that although I work in tourism mostly, that's not the reason I came here. I came here because I wanted to be part of a small community. I absolutely love the everything about this area. So for me, it's very much being part of this community, and I feel very committed to that. And it just happens at the moment, most of the jobs I have are in tourism because that's what's there. But going back to what Lisa said, if the emphasis wasn't so much on tourism here and there were other opportunities, I'd want to be part of that. And I'm already used to living very frugally. It would make it possibly easier for me to find some accommodation, to feel more rooted here. And I'd be really happy to be part of building something different here. So it's not, for me, it's not, I'm not just here because of tourism. And I think it'd be good if we could change so that everything isn't based on that here. That's
very good. Right. Okay. I've got a comment here, a more critical one actually, from Dave McKenzie, as I'm sure most of you'll know from DMC Foods. And he says, I'm hearing a lot about the NC 500 here and how that needs to change its infrastructure, etc. Like, it's going to be here whenever we open up again. I haven't got the accent right here, but I'm saying Dave's words, you know. It's going to be here next week, next month, next year. It'll still be here. I am hearing nothing about the practicalities of how to actually deal with tourism and the coalface on a day-to-day basis. I.e., what are we going to do, put in place, etc. What's going to be in practice in terms of businesses, bed and breakfast, etc. And that kind of supplements another question that was from Wendy Benny, which I'm just going to go back up and get, which, well, it was a statement, but it's a really good question actually, is I'm going to turn it into a question. She says, my concern is the safety for cleaners. And I suppose, can we have some comment about that? Now, I should say, before you can have a think about that, but it's coming up to 9 o'clock. So we've decided, Brendan and I, that we will keep going till maybe 20 past, 9:30. If anyone needs to go, just go. It's okay. This is just a local thing, so don't
And
worry.
if you need to go to the toilet, you just have to raise your hand, okay?
Just put your screen off and go. So I think we've got enough here to go on for another little while because it's interesting. So what about the cleaners? And Di, yes, Di and then Jock, right? Di, what about the cleaners?
Well, a couple of things here. Yes, I hear what David says. The North Coast 500 isn't going to go away. You know, we don't have it in our ability, I don't think, to change that. I mean, we're going to live with it. As for opening up, folk may or may not be aware that there is a group that is working on this charter Safe for All for Ullapool, which will be publicised, and that will become more knowledge of that in the next few weeks. But there are things going on in the background that probably a lot of folk aren't aware of. And Welcome Ullapool have received a grant of £2,000 to invest in sanitisers, which was publicised in the Ullapool News this week, and is going out there to businesses, anywhere that's got through traffic around the area, you know, the museum, with starting off with hand sanitizer, which will be supplied to people. There is a plan for posters to go up and information to go out on the Welcome Ullapool website, and hopefully we can spread that out via members and distribute that to visitors before they actually come to the area. We won't be able to capture the day trippers, but we would like to welcome visitors back to the area slowly, but who were aware of what the community, how it feels, and we would like them to be respectful and work with the community. So on one thing, there are lots going on in the background that will become, you know, out publicly in the next sort of week or so. As far as cleaners, I mean, yes, I have a concern with that because I have a team of housekeepers, and before we open up, which we will do slowly, then we need to have systems in place to protect those housekeepers. And I'm waiting for guidance from the government, which will be out about the 20th of June, for how we go about cleaning, what PPE we should be providing. And I mean, I personally wouldn't want anybody to be at risk. I mean, I'm part of that team. I have somebody at home that falls into the vulnerable category. So it is a big concern, but I think we all have a responsibility to think about that before we open up and how we open up. And at this moment, I don't have the answers to that. I think it's something that we'll be working through in the next few weeks and
sure.
Assessments.
Jock, you were right. Jock, you wanted to say something, didn't you? Yeah, and then I'll go to Madeline, and then I want to come to Ruth after that.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Davy, for the question as well. I think that in terms of how we are actually ready in a physical sense to welcome people back at the point when, and obviously it's not going to be those of us in this Zoom chat who make the decision, but guidelines will come down from above as they have done for the entire duration of this lockdown. I think that acknowledging we can do things different in terms of the wider tourism economy, diversification of the economy, that's all absolutely right. But as Davy says, the NC 500 isn't going anywhere as a brand in the same way that the landscape that is encapsulated by it hasn't gone anywhere for thousands of years. And we do have to be ready in a COVID sense for the return of people. And I think that we can take our cue from folk like Davy and other shops that have been essential businesses who have been open through this coronavirus crisis, who have put in the shielding screens where appropriate, have got discipline. And I think that that's the other thing we have to remember, is that this is an international circumstance. And that even if we see only staycationers to start with, from across Scotland, even if they were just coming from the Highland region and there was some sort of regionality. We've all been living with this. So I think that for the most part, people have an understanding that precautions need to be taken. They will expect to see on the entrance to premises hand sanitizing equipment. They will understand that there will be a bit of traffic management within premises. I'm certainly hoping that they will, because, you know, as a licensee, then after people have partaken one or two shandies, then maybe they might forget some of the rules in the way that people have forgotten the rules before there was any coronavirus rules. So it's to be applauded that the UCT are there. Certainly from my own point of view, and I imagine everybody else within the sector, we had put a coronavirus policy in place before we were mandated to be shut, emphasizing distancing, a big uplift in the regularity of which hard surfaces were cleaned and so on. So taking the lead from those who've been open will be part of it. Having very strict and clearly displayed guideline policies within a business will be there. But I think we have to remember that most of the population are minded to be as canny as the rest of us.
Yeah, very good. Madeline, you were wanting to say something? Yeah.
Just that I entirely agree with David that the NC 500 is with us. All that I would propose is that we try as a community with other communities to get together to maybe make the NC 500 a better experience for the people who come. It will always be here, but instead of dashing through, can we encourage them? And you can't make rules about you can only stay, but you can't stay one night, you've got to stay 3. We've got to market in such a way that people want it that way. They want to come and stay longer. And we've got to find a way to market that. And I think we have to work together to do that, and with other communities around the NC 500, because there are all sorts of complaints from the North Coast, Betty Hill, so on and so forth, and other places, Applecross, etc. We could all be working together so that we do a marketing project that markets it in such a way that people don't want to dash through. They want this not just to see, but to feel and experience the place. And as Jock said earlier, it's not just the scenery, it's the people sitting around at night talking or listening to some local music and so on. We want to encourage and sell that as part of our product.
Yes, definitely. It would be a complete shame to dash through Betty Hill. I would agree with you on that. Ruth, you were going to comment, and I'm going to go to Laura after that, because I think it would just to make sure everyone's getting a say, you know?
Yeah. Oh, Madeline, I just wanted to agree with you on that one. I know that the industry have already started tracking a trend since last year, like in the NC 500 market, that the tendency to want a base camp to stay somewhere for 2 or 3 nights is growing more and more. So it's already a kind of a thing that's meeting people's needs. And I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, that would be way more visible now. Like, I know that that's the kind of the marketing strategy I would be having myself towards the NC 500 market. And in the last 2 years, it's the thing I've been asked most often is, can I stay another night? Because when people get here, they realize the frantic driving doesn't really meet anyone's, it doesn't really feel that good. But I think the question was about the practicalities. And I think my top tip is, like, use this time. Like, we probably have only a few weeks until there's the impact of more and more different types of loosening or breakaway people happens. And really, it doesn't take a lot of exposure, just like one super spreader coming into the village. Like, so for me, it's like, do whatever we can right now in every single business and every single public facing domain and every single organization to get the things in place that will keep us safe, like COVID contact kits for every first aid kit in the village, the hand sanitizers, the kind of staff training, all that kind of thing. It is an incredibly difficult situation.
Yeah,
and the reality is that we're going to be the new, like, another level of essential frontline workers, because cleaning is going to be quite an exposure risk,
Yeah, sure. And just to answer Davy's question as well, Ruth, I was going to say, could you say a little bit about the work that you've been doing with Ullapool, the Ullapool focus group to create a survey, and the idea about safe visitors charter?
Yes, so yeah, as long as yourself and I, we're in this group called Safe for All Charter Ullapool, and it's around looking at how to replace lockdown with a set of social agreements and physical things that can tapestry together in order to create a safe environment for us all. So not just about tourism, not just about visitors, not just about residents, but all together. And it kind of will come, I would say for myself, it's coming from that I protect you, you protect me kind of philosophy, that recognizes that any of us could carry COVID. It's not just me protecting myself and my guests, but also protecting my guests from me, just in case I'm contaminated, that kind of thing. And as long as we all carry that kind of philosophy, then we take responsibility for doing things that are actually quite clunky. Like, it's really awkward feeling to do a lot of these things that keep us safe, like staying a bit too far away from each other, or wearing a mask at the shop. And like, I've heard a lot online about people feeling self-conscious. So yeah, we've put together a survey which will be out in the next few days, I think by Wednesday. And I would encourage everyone to kind of participate.
Yeah.
And give some really good
I've no idea what people will say in response to the survey. I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are, because it'll give us another way of gauging the kind of the conversation we've had tonight. Laura, I'm going to come to you. Do you have any comments about all of what you've heard?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe add something to what Madeline said about us coming together as communities around the Highlands to talk to visitors and give them the marketing messages that we want to give them. And I can speak to that a little bit, because we've been having a go at that in Assynt and Kylesku over the last couple of weeks through a sense of place work that we've been doing. That's the Kylesku Assynt Living Landscape that have been doing that. And there's a PhD student from Stirling University who's currently doing Centre Place Westeros work. And it's exactly that, it's getting communities to get together and talk about what it's like to live here and what's special about the place, what we love most about it, and then use that to communicate to visitors about us, rather than having a kind of top-down approach. It's like great that things like Visit Scotland and North Coast 500 have really powerful marketing channels, but there's another level of authenticity that we can get by actually speaking to visitors as communities, and more than just the tourism industry speaking to visitors. So I think we've had quite good success with that so far in Kylesku and Assynt, and it would be great to see that extended well down south and far up north as well. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how we go about that, because obviously there's resource commitments that need to go with it. But I would be more than happy to talk to any community that fancies giving it a go about my experiences of running that kind of project in Kylesku and Assynt.
Yeah, it really takes that kind of cross-community effort, I suppose, to really get something coherent across the Northwest Highlands. Right, I'm going to give you some more of the comments that are coming in here. Wendy Benny has said again, I keep hearing that self-catering would be allowed to open first. As an owner of 4 lets, I cannot see how to open without serious change to my business. That's a comment. Maybe I'll get some of you to comment on that. Ian Simpson from Ackledy is saying, I think markets will always respond to needs. So long as there's a demand for single night stays, there will be businesses happy to provide it. I operate an Airbnb in Ackledy with a 3-night minimum stay, which is partially to reduce my workload, but partly to give us longer exposure to the area. Also, many NC 500C speed round will come back to single areas in the future for a longer stay. I think that's probably true. Once you've seen the place that you're speeding through, you'll realize that you probably would want to come back. I'd hope that would be the case, and I don't know if any of you are experiencing that. I'll come round you all to sum up, so you have a think about these as I'm saying them, and you can pick up any of the issues here that's the case. A comment from Duncan Cook here saying it's weird hearing so many calls for decent broadband when HCB already provides it. Maybe focus on helping them improve. I'll keep that. There's another comment I'll keep till the very end there. But here's Don Tyson saying, I think our community need to start putting practices in place now for when visitors come. I think that's a good point. Nicola has asked us to wear face masks in shops, etc., as it reduces contagion. And if our community enforce this in all shops, etc., the community will be protecting our staff, visitors, and the future of the future and the vulnerable. So yeah, that's a good point. I don't see too many face masks in Ullapool. And I hold my hand up here because I don't. I just can't manage to do it, but I really should do, you know. And let's see. That's just one of the many practices. It should be in place before tourism reopens. Okay, what about the casual and seasonal workers, many of whom have been abandoned, overlooked by various support schemes? Right, there's quite a chunk of, there are people listening to us here. We're not just talking to ourselves, which is really good. That's what we wanted. And there's about enough material here for about our 4 shows, I think. So both of those things. But I just want to maybe go round and maybe you could pick up on some of those points. And I'll just go back to what I did at the start. And I'm going to start with Ruth and go up the ways and round. And I'll finish with Brendan. So you can get ready. Ruth, any comments on any of that, on any last words that you'd like to say?
Yeah, just pick up on that idea that we, you know, because of what's happening, it's going to be really hard to reopen businesses as it is. That's absolutely for sure. There's no way that I can foresee selling a dorm bed in the next 2 years even. You know, I don't know how long it's going to be, but you know, it's as a thing, it's not going to be very marketable for a long time, and I'm not going to be able to offer a shared kitchen for a long time. So part of my adapting is that I'm moving out of my pod and I'm moving into where the dorms were, so that I only sell the things that are easy to clean and have no carpets, and that are the safest things for me to clean and that people will want to be safe in. So yeah, I think every individual business is going to have to assess what's the most risky thing to do in that business and who are the most vulnerable staff, and then shift the least vulnerable staff into the higher risk area. All that kind of stuff you need to do, like that complex risk assessment of, actually, I'm not giving people bedding anymore because my partner has a heart condition and I love people, but they're just not worth it. And I don't know how to change a duvet cover without getting dust on myself. So because I'm a hostel, I can afford to do that. I'm not a hotel. I can go back to old school and say, well, you know, this is the way it is. And it's a beautiful view still, but bring your own sleeping bag, you know, that kind of thing. So I have that liberty. Yeah. And I think my top feeling is that just to remember that people mostly fall when they're walking down the mountain, and that this bit of going out of lockdown and into reopening is probably way more dangerous than the bit where we were all locked, you know, it is, than the bit when we've been locked in our house for ages. So yeah.
That's a good point indeed. Lisa, you're next. You seem to have moved around. I don't know why it was that, but Lisa, you're next in my viewfinder here.
Yeah, I don't know. The tiles seem to rearrange themselves. I don't think it's anything that I'm doing. Yes, I suppose my 2 main thoughts at the end of this meeting are, first of all, that my heart goes out to anyone whose livelihood depends on tourism at this time, or in fact on any business that's been affected by this situation, because you know, it was completely unforeseen, and nobody could have planned for this, and nobody could have predicted, I don't think, how hard this was going to hit and how bad this was going to get. And so yes, I absolutely, I can't begin to imagine how difficult it must have been as a situation to cope with it. And then the other side is that I do think there are lots of opportunities. I think that a lot of historical change has come out of points of crisis. And I think we are at one of those points right now. And I think there is definitely an opportunity for all kinds of change at all kinds of different levels. And I think we'd be mad to miss the opportunity. In all the trying to ping back to what we think of as normal, I think we should actually not go back, we should go forward and do it wisely.
It's very tricky to do that, but I think I agree with you entirely. Yeah, if we can find some mechanisms to make that happen. Laura, what are your summing up points?
Well, I'm just enjoying kind of listening to people's opinions on it, but it seems like, you know, we're all in the same boat here in that we want to reinvigorate the economy, but everyone's anxious about it. And I think I really welcome the work that the Safe Tourism Charter is doing in just going through a process with people to try and understand what those anxieties are and what we can do to mitigate our own anxieties, more than the kind of physical, practical things, but more the psychological aspects of reopening tourism and welcoming visitors back. And also that visitors aren't necessarily strangers, they can also be your own friends and family, and do we want to welcome them back into our area as well? I really do. I really miss my family now. I would really like to see them again. And so it's really great that we can all be candid with each other as a community and talk to each other about this and plan together.
Very good. Madeline, you're next on my screen, so what's your final thought?
Right, thank you. Well, I could come back to what Laura said about community, and I believe very strongly in the community. And what she said was so right, that communities, thankfully, through CALL, are having meetings and trying to sort this out. It seems to me that when I travel, I like to be involved with people where I travel and find out about the place I am from listening and being with the people of the community in which I'm staying. And that has happened to me all over the world and has been a wonderful experience in many places. And I think that I would like people who come round NC 500 or wherever, that they have this same experience. And what Laura says is quite true about having community talking about how they want to market, and they can only market in a small way. And they can't really do the marketing that Visit Scotland or NC 500 can do. But what I would like to see is that the communities around the NC 500, the whole thing together, could come together and influence the marketing that NC 500 and Visit Scotland do, because we're the people on the ground. They should be marketing what we want marketed.
Thank you.
I always come back to community.
Yeah, exactly. I agree a lot of what you said about going around the world and meeting other people is as important as the actual sites you see. Di, what would be your final word on this tonight? I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
Yeah, I just think that we're a very strong community. You know, Ullapool, Koyak, Lochbroom, and that we should share the knowledge that we have and bring people together in their different areas of expertise. And, you know, there's been comments about how will self-catering open up, how will cleaners manage and things like that. There'll be a few people around who I'm sure would be happy to talk to each other and share knowledge. I think also just on a local point that we should think of others around the community, within the community and the visitors that we have. And I think the big thing is be kind to everybody, which has been a saying that's been, you know, about for a while now, because you don't know anybody else's situation. And we need to be mindful of that and be caring. And although it's going to be a scary time coming out of this, I mean, we are all in it together. You know, the whole world's in it. It's not just Ullapool, and we should learn from everybody's experience and stay strong as a community.
Thank you, Di. Any final word from you, Caroline?
I mean, everyone's made such great points. I found it really interesting hearing you all, and I feel quite comforted by the vast amount of experiences here on the panel, and just the fact that so many people have listened in makes me feel that we definitely are all in this together. I would like to think that we can, whatever we do going forward is based on excitement's maybe the wrong word, but not decisions made from fear, but decisions made based on what opportunities this might give us to change things to a way we'd like them to be changed. And I just think also we're so adaptable. We went into this really quickly and we adapted, and things in the village have been incredible. You know, the way the shops have looked after us and adapted, and businesses, and so we can do that again. You know, I do think. And then Jock, I think Jock just touched on something I think is quite important too, that it's easy to think that these people that are going to come from the outside and be quite careless and bring COVID. They're not. They're all people that have also been living with COVID. So they are coming with their own awareness. And if we've got the means in place to make it safe, you know, safe as possible, they're also wanting to keep safe. They're not just going to arrive, you know, to attack us. Really, they're also, as Jock said, it's an international problem. Everyone's living with it. So they'll also be wanting to take care of themselves and hopefully take care of us.
Jock, a last word from you for now.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for a really grand discussion. It's been really interesting to hear everything. I have the privilege again of coming at the end, and so don't have a great deal to add, other than to agree strongly that the way we've done things in a macro sense really has an opportunity to be questioned here, and for us to get to grips with what are the important aspects, not just of getting businesses back to running, but is working 4 days a week and enjoying some of the time that we've had with an income to be aspired to, instead of going straight back to the rat race. I'm really pleased with the community broadband keeping those of you who can work from home being able to do so, but I'd ask you to spare a thought for those of us who work in industries where home working is very difficult. I couldn't serve that many dinners in my living room, and maybe wouldn't want to come. But above all, the Kyle Place are really looking forward to getting back to looking after the local community first and foremost, and slowly welcoming that trickle or onslaught of visitors from further afield in due course. Thanks.
We could have done this in the pub, couldn't we? Yeah, right. I'm going to turn to my right-hand man here tonight, Brendan, who's been feeding me all the information that's coming in online and keeping me right. Brendan, you got a last word here, and then I'll close after that.
Sure. In my role of relaying comments, there was one from somebody called Lee Heaney, and he said that she agrees with Dawn, who was commenting on YouTube. It would be good if more people wore masks. So that might have been aimed at somebody not too far away from her.
Yes, I think
more
so,
seriously, yeah. I actually do think, and as it happens, there have been quite a few other comments on the YouTube chat about mask wearing and encouraging people to wear more, and wondering why it isn't really happening yet, particularly perhaps in Ullapool. People like, you know, Judith Bryant and Dawn Tyson and Ian Simpson were all making these sorts of points. But I mean, we in Assynt and in Coyoch are comparatively fortunate, perhaps for a start, that we're in smaller communities, but you know, we have very effective programs already going to provide all households and householders and children, etc., with masks. Probably haven't quite reached everybody in Assynt yet, but we're very close to it, I think. And I think Ullapool really, you know, needs to see if it can catch up with that. And I speak as a sort of part-time Ullapudlian and on the Ullapool Community Trust. And I think one of the main things is that we need to, particularly men, need to get over this kind of barrier about that it somehow, like Donald Trump feels, it makes you feel in some way less of a man or less of a person, or, you know, that you look weird. Because it is, you know, we've got now WHO and everybody else is recommending that it is there. And also, I think, particularly for the kind of frontline workers, whether they're in Tesco, whether they're on the bus or anywhere else where you know, in Boots or places like that, it is, I think, just part of courtesy. And of course, beyond courtesy, it may actually help to just, you know, cut down the possibilities of transmission a little bit. And, you know, particularly in Coyoch, the masks are particularly funky, and hopefully Ullapool can produce ones like that as well. And finally, just, you know, as one of the sort of main organizers with Dave of this has been really wonderful. You've all just been so articulate and, you know, covered quite a range of points, even though there has been a fair degree of consensus and agreement on the panel, and we've had really good participation in terms of people commenting, mostly actually on the YouTube channel. We thought it would be mostly on Facebook, but there we go. That's interesting as well. So it's really encouraged us, you know, in the radio team, I think, to try this kind of thing again. We may pick up on some of the points that we've had, and set up, you know, further discussions like this in future.
Yes, thanks, Brendan. This won't be solved next week, so yeah, and we can't have conversations. I think this has worked well, so it's been good. It's actually been good to have a conversation. It's felt great to do that, and I just wanted to. There's a good comment here from Ian McLachlan of Ascent Development Trust. I think it's worth just pointing out. I just came in late here, so it's just to say what we see now is previous visitors realizing there was too much to see during their flying visits, and they're returning for longer visits even outside of the season, and breaking seasonality is key. I think that's maybe what we're all aiming for. What would help is seeing a portion of those visitors realizing the quality of life on offer here in the Northwest, and thinking about moving to live and work here, which would go a small way to countering the alarming depopulation rates amongst our working age population that the Hutton report predicted last year. Fibre broadband, part of that, so improving. Post-COVID, the well-being aspect of what life here offers will be key. There we go. I thought that was a really good way of summing that up. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I'm going to thank everybody who listened or watched us on Facebook and YouTube, and especially thank all the people here who gave their views and shared their views. I thought it was a fantastic way to spend this Sunday evening, and I think we'll probably do this again sometime. So thanks very much, folks, and see you again soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Okay.